Last week, we started a new series entitled Parenting 101. And the reason we named this series Parenting 101 is because we're focusing on the basics of parenting. But that's what most parents need. And I'm not just talking about new parents. Every parent needs to know the basics of parenting. If you're an empty nester and your children are out of the house, I want you to understand they're always your kids, right? You know, my mom used to say this all the time. I don't care if you're 60 years old. When you're 60, you're still going to be my child. And I understand it because I have kids. They are always going to be my children. And even though they're out of the house, I still want to learn all I can about parenting because I'm their parent. Not only that, I'm going to have grandchildren. And I know that my kids are going to want my advice on how to do it. But you do need to know the basics of parenting. So last week I began by giving you the goal of parenting. Do you remember what the goal of parenting is? The goal of parenting is to raise your children to be godly and independent. Now, if you want your kids to be godly and independent, then you're going to have to instill within them certain convictions and values. But that's easier said than done. And the reason I say that is because to do that, you have to form a strong bond with each of your children. And let me tell you, it takes time and energy to form the type of bond that I'm talking about. But if you do that, I promise you it will pay huge dividends. And I explained why last week by giving you two axioms. How many of you remember what an axiom is? An axiom is a self-evident or universally recognized truth. So here's axiom number one. The stronger the bond with your children, the more likely they'll be to embrace your core values and convictions. On the other hand, axiom number two. The weaker the bond with your children, the less likely they'll be to embrace your core values and your convictions. So people, it's all about forming a strong bond with your children. I also gave you the two most opportune times to develop a strong bond with your children and to instill within them your convictions and your values. And do you remember what they were? The first one is eating dinner at the table. That's a lost art in the family, and it shouldn't be. Eating dinner at the table. And number two is tucking them into bed at night. Now listen to me. You need to eat dinner at the table at least 4 nights out of the week. 4 nights. That is a hard, fast rule. I don't care if you say, well, you know, we're spending time together, we're going here, we're going there, we stop to get something to eat, and we visit while we're in the car. Let me say that. That does not count. If you cannot stay at home 4 nights out of the week, then your children need to give up some of their activities. I promise you, you're going to have big problems with your kids if you're not staying home at least 4 nights out of the week and eating dinner at the table. You also need to tuck your kids into bed at least 4 nights out of the week. Minimum 4 nights. On the same night that you eat dinner at the table, those are the nights that you tuck your kids into bed. Mama does it 2 nights. Daddy does it 2 nights. Daddy doesn't like to hear that, right? Why do I say Daddy needs to do it 2 nights? Because both parents need to develop a strong bond with their children. And when you tuck them in, you make it a devotional time where you read a Bible story and then you talk about the story. And you talk about how it relates to their life and how they can apply it and how it applies to your life. And then you pray. In fact, let me show you the Bible that we're recommending. This is what you saw when you were looking on the screen. This is the Cornerstone Bible. There are 3 volumes to the set. And let me explain why we recommend this. The reason we recommend this is because this Bible is translated into a graphic novel. Anyone know what a graphic novel is? If you're young, you do, but if you're older like me, you might not. What is a graphic novel? It's a comic book. Yeah, it's a comic book. But here's what's wonderful. The illustrations are unbelievable. In fact, I actually ordered this for my library. And I went in to show my wife. I said, I want you to see these books that I ordered. And she came into my office and I pulled them out. She said, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. I said, I know. I can't wait to have grandkids. I'm going to tuck them into bed at night. And this is what I'm going to be reading to. It goes all the way from creation all the way to the book of Revelation. And the pictures are just stunning. Now, I gave them all to my staff and told them to go home, and they were reading it to their children, and they were talking about, my gosh, the kids are just zoned in on them. And I'll be honest with you, even when they hit the teenage years, These kids want to read graphic novels. Those are the most checked out books in all the library, bar none. Graphic novels. And what you can do before your kids ever can read is you can read this to them and show them the pictures as you're going through it. And the pictures are unbelievable. Wait till you get to the book of Revelation. Now, it is graphic. It's kind of scary. But you can go through the book of Revelation, and as you're reading through this book, they're seeing these pictures. And so this is what we recommend. Now, let me say this. We're selling them for $40. The cheapest place you can get them is on Amazon Prime for $67.50. If you buy them from Cornerstone, they're $75. A year and a half ago, they were $150 for this set. $50 a volume. They ran a special at Christmas, and my wife saw them. She said, we need that for the church. And we were able to get them for $40. And of course, we never make any money. So we're selling these right after church for $40. Here's the problem. We could only get 80 sets. You cannot buy individual volumes. You have to buy it as a set. But we only have 80. Now, we don't want to have a Walmart run. All right? We do not want to be on the news that so many people were trampled. But let me say this. If you have children and you want to start tucking them into bed at night, you wonder what should I read, then you need to do this. Let me tell you what else we're going to be doing. It'll be 3 or 4 months as we're revamping our children's department. On our website, we're going to have a site that shows you what to read 4 nights out of the week. So basically, you'll know exactly what you should read, and there'll be a couple of questions that will help you to get the discussion going after you read the section. Why? Because it's your responsibility to disciple your children. It's your responsibility to lead them to Christ. We are here to help you, and we're going to do everything we can to help you. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that your child receives Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. But you've got to do your part. So we highly recommend that you do that. So, at your nightly devotional, when you tuck your kids in at bed, you read a Bible story, you talk about it, and then you pray 4 nights a week. Now this morning, I'm going to give you a list of all the ways you can use to form a strong bond with your children. Because remember, the stronger the bond with your children, the more likely they'll be to embrace your core values and your convictions. The weaker the bond with your child, the less likely they'll be to embrace your core values and your convictions. So it's all about forming a strong bond. So here's a list of all the ways to form a strong bond with your children. Number 1, spend quality time with your kids when you tuck them in at night. Make it a devotional time, but also make it a fun time. It should be special. Lots of hugs, lots of kisses. Number 2, eat dinner at the table. How many times a week? If you're on the road all the time because your kids are involved in too many activities, what do? You make them choose. Well, I can't do that to my kids. You're the parent. You need to understand something. Where they spend eternity is up to you. We want to make sure they're in heaven. Number 3, express unconditional love through words and actions. Let me tell you what I told my children. I told both of my kids this, and I didn't just tell them once. I told them this all the time, and still tell them this. There's nothing you can do that will ever make me stop loving you. Nothing. Nothing. But that doesn't mean I'll always approve of what you do or accept it. And if you do something that's necessary for me to practice tough love, I'll practice tough love, and I'll cut you off. But I want you to understand the reason it's called tough love is because it will kill me to do that. But I want you to know, even if I have to do that, I will always love you. So you need to express unconditional love through words and actions. Number 4, you schedule time with your kids, and I'm talking about quality time. There needs to be nights that you have game nights. Maybe you play cards, maybe you play dominoes, maybe you play a board game. Now, it's kind of hard for me to say cards because my Granny Riddell didn't allow cards in the house. She was old time. But growing up, we played cards, we played spades, we played spoons, we played those type of things. And my parents played that with us. That was a great family time, and that's how we developed family. Remember our saying in family. There's nothing more important than family. We work together, we help each other, and we make personal sacrifices for the good of the family. I learned that growing up through having these family times. You can have movie nights. You can have recreational time where you do things as a family. We didn't go to the swimming pool when I was growing up. We went swimming about once a week in the summer. We went to Barren Fork Creek. Yeah. Only rich people had swimming pools. Didn't have 35 cents to go there. You get a free God's swimming pool out there. And of course, we would cook hot dogs and do those type of things, but that was family time. Number 5, when they want to talk, give them your undivided attention. Put your iPad down. Put your phone down. Men, turn the TV off. Make eye contact. Tell them to sit by you, and you listen. You let them talk as long as they want to talk. Show physical affection. That means hugs and kisses. I know a lot of you men, well, I'm just not that kind of guy. My parents weren't affectionate, and I just don't feel comfortable with that. Well, see, my secondary love language is physical touch, and one of the things I have to keep from doing is when I see someone that I met maybe 2 or 3 times, first thing I want to do is hug them. I can't tell you the number of men that I've hugged that went, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Didn't mean to break your comfort zone. But let me just say this. Even if you're not affectionate, you show your kids, you show your little boys, your little girls how much you love them. You hug on them, you kiss on them. And here's how you make it easy. When they're babies, you hug and kiss on them. And they always remain your baby, so as they grow into toddlers, you're still doing that. You're playing tickle monster. You're bringing them in. But you kiss on them and you hug on them. To this day, we still tell each other we love them, we love you, and we hug. And I'm still kissing my girls. They know that Daddy's going to kiss them because that's who Daddy is. Number 7, you do things that create memories, such as vacations, trips. And let me tell you, if you don't have much money, when the girls were little, we took a vacation every year to Tulsa. We didn't stay in very nice hotels, but we always stayed in one that had a swimming pool. We would go to Reese's before we left, and we would buy deli meat because that was special. And we would eat many times in the hotel because we didn't have much money. Went into the ministry, and we were poor the first few years, many years. Kids didn't know any different. Went to the matinees because it was cheap. And they had the best time. Some of you take your little kids when they're 4 or 5 down to Disney World. You spend all that money, and all they do is cry because they're tired. And you're upset because they didn't enjoy it. They're 4 and 5 years old. Take them to Tulsa, stay in a hotel, swim a pool. Go to Chuck E. Cheese's, and they're happy. Create special memories and traditions, especially around the holidays. We have certain family traditions that we do. Micah Joy is going to be 33 this next year. Macy's going to be 30. And what's kind of interesting is if we don't do things just right, they're kind of upset because that's tradition. That's what we do as a family. Now, I've taught this before, but I wanted to remind you of this before I went a little bit deeper. So now that I've done that, let me give you the number 1 way to bond with your children. This is the number 1 way. The number 1 way. If you're taking notes, you write this down. Now, what does that tell you since I said that? A couple of weeks ago, I taught a sermon on how to have a good life. And I told you, you don't have to learn hundreds of principles in order to have a good life. You only have to learn about 35 to 40. Because in order to have a good life, you have to obey God's commands and principles. And the first time I told people that, I was like, oh, disappointment. I've got to learn hundreds of principles. I told you, no. If you want to have a good life, you need to learn about 6 or so principles in every domain of your life, in every aspect of your life. About 6 or so. You want to get your finances in order? You only have to learn about 6 or so financial principles, and you'll get your finances in order. You want to have a good marriage? You only have to learn about 6 or so marriage principles in order to have a good marriage. Parenting, you only have to learn about 6 or so parenting principles in order to have good kids. Yeah. So, I'm telling you this is really important. So what does that tell you? This is one of the 6 or so. Here goes. The number 1 way to bond with your children is by expressing love to them in their love language. So let's talk about the love languages. Let's start with the basics. There are 5 basic ways to express love. Number 1, you can express love through words of affirmation. You can say things like, I love you, you're the most important thing to me. I don't know how I would live without you. I've always told my girls from the time they were little, you are my most valuable asset, even before they even knew what an asset was. Now, I know that sounds kind of funny because that sounds like a possession, but they are my possession. They're my special possession. They are my most valuable possession. Nothing is more valuable to me than my children, and they know that. Number 2, you can express love by spending quality time with a person. That quality time means one-on-one. Doesn't mean going to a movie. It doesn't mean that we went and we played a game or we did this or that. If you can spend one-on-one time, that's quality time. That's a way you can express love. Number 3, you can express love through gift giving. I'm not a gift giver. I don't express love that way. You give me a gift, I go, thank you. And inside it's like, oh yeah, did I really need that or want that? Not really. Why? Because that doesn't express love to me. That's not my predominant way of expressing love or my secondary way. But others, it is. You know, if you give them a gift and it's a special gift, that expresses love to them. And when they express love, the way they express love is they find that special gift. And when they give it to you, they're expressing love to you. Number 4, you can express love by acts of service, by doing something for someone. You know, there's a lot of people that the way they express love is by doing things for people, by making meals, or Lisa will make cheesecakes for people and give them cheesecakes or whatever it is. Number 5, it's the 5th way you can express love is through physical touch. Now, every man who ever hears about the 5 love languages, the first time they hear them, they go, that's mine, I'm physical touch, because they're thinking sex. This is not sex. Imagine having no testosterone pumping through your body. Your libido is 0. Do you still want to hold hands? Do you still want to cuddle? Do you want your wife sitting right here? Is the first thing you do when they sit by you is you just reach out there and you pat them, or you rub their back, or you're just always touching. That's physical touch. That's how you can express love. All of these are legitimate ways to express love. But out of these 5, only one is the predominant way that you express love. You also have a secondary way. So out of these 5 ways, every one of you has a predominant way that you express love and a secondary way. And the reason that you express love that way is because that's the way you want and need love expressed to you. Now, these 5 ways to express love are usually referred to as love languages. And the reason they're referred to as love languages is because they describe the way a person communicates love to others and the way they like others communicating love to them. So the 5 ways to express love are usually referred to as the 5 love languages. But they are simply 5 different ways to express love. And again, out of those 5, you will have a predominant way that you express love and you like love expressed to you, and you'll have a secondary way that you like expressing love to people and you like them expressing love to you. Is everyone with me? Good. Now listen to me, parents, because this is very important. If you don't express love in your child's love language, they won't feel loved, regardless of how much you love them. And here's what you have to understand. The more your child feels loved by you, the greater and stronger the bond they develop with you, and vice versa. Now let me say that again because it's so important. The more your child feels loved by you, the greater and stronger the bond they develop with you, and vice versa. And I'll explain what I mean by vice versa in just a minute. Now let me give you a personal example to illustrate what I'm saying and how important it is. My predominant love language is words of affirmation, and my secondary love language is physical touch. My mom's predominant love language was words of affirmation, and her secondary love language was physical touch. So we had and shared the same love languages. So when I was a child, every time that my mom entered the room, she would run her hand through my hair. And yes, I had hair back then. And when I looked up, because it was just the natural thing for me to do, she would grasp my face in her hands, and she would look down to me, and she would say, I love you. You're perfect. If you had any faults, I would know about it because I'm your mama. And you don't have any faults. You're perfect. And let me tell you, every time my mom did that, I felt loved. Now, my dad's predominant love language is acts of service, and his secondary love language is gift giving. Those two aren't even on my radar. Now, as a child, Dad coached my baseball teams, and he purposely spent time with all of us. He would get out there and he'd play with us. He'd swim with us. You know, I used to remember my dad running from us when we were swimming at Barren Fork, and now I understand he'd always have 5 kids just wrapped around him. And he was trying to get away from us, really was. We thought it was a game, and we're just chasing Dad, get him. And he was the one responsible for buying all of our big gifts. You know, every Christmas we always got a family gift. Dad bought the go-karts, the mini bikes. He bought the pool tables, a boat, the cars, all of those things. My dad even wanted to buy an indoor or a in-ground swimming pool to go in our backyard. My mom wouldn't let him. Her predominant way of expressing love was not gift giving, and we didn't need that. All of the big gifts that we ever received came from my dad. But here's what's interesting. Even though I appreciated what my dad did and what he gave us, I never connected it with love. Now, I knew Dad loved me, but the things that he did not make me feel loved. In other words, they didn't communicate love to me. So the bond with my mom was much greater and stronger than it was with my dad. Now, that doesn't mean that I loved my mom more than I loved my dad. That's not right. It simply means that my mom made me feel loved more than my dad did, because she communicated love in a way that I needed it communicated. So I bonded more with my mom than I did with my dad. Now, I loved them both the same, but I had a stronger bond with my mom. In fact, my mom is the reason I'm in the pastorate today. She's the reason I'm a preacher. You see, because of the bond I had with her, I just naturally embraced her convictions, her beliefs, her values without even realizing it. And I'll tell you something interesting that I really didn't realize until I grew up. This was about 15 to 20 years ago. I came to this realization, and it really hit me. As a child, if I did something wrong and I knew I was going to get in trouble, I didn't want my dad to know about it because he would spank. And my dad could spank. But I didn't want my mom to know about it because she would be disappointed in me. And I didn't want to disappoint my mom. Now, my dad, no big deal. So what if he was disappointed in me? He would get over it. He had 4 boys. They were always disappointing him, and I knew I wouldn't be the worst. But I did not want to disappoint my mom. People, that's the power of bonding. You see, the power of bonding can make you feel like you're betraying, or you're, in a sense, letting them down if you don't live by their convictions and their values. Even when I wasn't saved, even when I was running from the Lord and I did certain things, I didn't want my dad to find out because he'd probably spank me, but I didn't want my mom to find out because I felt like I was betraying her. I felt like I was letting her down by not living by her convictions and her values. And as a result of that, it kept me out of a lot of things until those actually became my convictions, my values, and my beliefs. Now, listen to me. I can't tell you how many times children have told me as they come to my office because the parents want them to, and I sit down and listen to them, and they'll make this comment, my parents don't love me like they do my brothers, or they don't love me like they do my sisters. And I know that's not true. I know that's not the case. But here's the problem. The parents aren't communicating love in the way their child needs love communicated to them, in a way that they feel loved. And the parent is just grasping for straws because I don't know what to do. I just love this kid. And they'll say, you don't love me like the rest of the kids. I can tell you what it is. You're not communicating love in a way that communicates love to them. You're not sharing the love language that they speak. You see, If you don't communicate love in the way that they need love communicated to them, they won't feel love no matter how much you love them. And the more they feel loved by you, the greater and stronger the bond they're going to develop with you, and vice versa. Now, what do I mean by vice versa? You feel it too, as a parent. You might not voice it, but you have a stronger bond with one or two of your children than you do with the others. And you want to know why? It's because you share the same love languages. Doesn't mean that you love those one or two more. It's just that you just have this connection because you're speaking the same language. So when you're expressing love to your children, if you express it in the way that you communicate love, and they have the same love language, you're speaking the same love language. And as a result of that, you're connecting on a deeper level. And you didn't even know why. In fact, some of you feel guilty because I just bond easier with these two. You know, I just have a closer connection with these two. I'll tell you why. It's because you share the same love language. It's not that you love them anymore. It's just that you share that same love language. So it's easier to bond with them. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, if you want to bond with all of your children, then you have to find out what their love language is, and then you have to start communicating love to them in a way that they feel loved. In other words, you have to speak their love language. And let me use my kids as an example. That's the best way I know how to do it. Micah's love language is gift giving and words of affirmation. She expresses love by the giving of gifts and through words of affirmation. So when she was little, she was always making me gifts. And she would bring them to me and she'd say, Daddy, this is a gift for you. In fact, that was the word she would use. This is a gift for you. And I'd take and go, oh, that just means the world to me. And if I went somewhere, it didn't matter if it was just 50 cents or 75 cents, I'd buy something, say, honey, this is a gift for you. You got me a gift. Yes, I got you a gift. But when she would give me things, many times she would then want to climb up in my lap. And she would always grasp my face. It's just kind of interesting. My mom did this, and Micah did this. It must be genetic. But she would grasp my face just like this with both hands. She'd look deep in my eyes. She'd say, Daddy, I love you. And I'd do the same thing because that's my predominant way. I would just cup her little cheeks, and I'd say, honey, you are the most beautiful thing. I love you more than life itself. You're so smart. I'm so proud of you. And she would just beam, and then she would hug me tight. Yeah. Macy's love language is quality time and words of affirmation. Now notice, I share words of affirmation with both of my children. She always wanted me to come sit down by her. And she wanted us to do something without Micah and Mama. In fact, that was her words. Daddy, let's do something without Micah and Mama. Okay, what do you want to do? And we would do it. When Lisa went back to school, she went over to JBU, and then she finished up at Northeastern State. I was supposed to take Macy to No Greater Joy. That was the daycare center. She was like 4 years old, and she didn't want to go. There was a little girl there that ran it, Sammy Joe. I mean, you had kids that remember Sammy Joe. She ran that daycare. And Macy would go, Daddy, I don't want to go. I want to go to work with you. We were kind of small. If I didn't have any appointments, I would say, well, come to work with me. And so I'd set her up a little office, a little desk with her stuff, and she would be doing that. And then I'd go into the sanctuary to pray, and it wouldn't be probably 5 minutes that she would come to the sanctuary, find me, and I still had 30 minutes, 45 more minutes to pray. So I would go sit down, pick her up, and I would begin to rock her as I prayed. And I'd pray 30 to 40 minutes. Now you need to understand, quality time is her way. She just let me rock her as I prayed, and I'd get to the end, I'd say amen, and I'd hear this little whisper, amen. That was her. When she was in high school, we would go over to the Arkansas Razorback games, just me and her, and she likes basketball, and we would watch the basketball games. Always got a big Dr. Pepper and a corn dog, but it was one-on-one time. We had some great conversations. But that said love to her one-on-one. If you want to be able to express love to your kids, then you have to learn what their language is. So, how do you know what your child's love language is? Especially if they're not old enough to take a test, or even if they can read, they're not smart enough to really comprehend what the test questions are asking. So how do you know what their love language is? Well, believe it or not, it's pretty simple. You see, children will express love in the way they need it expressed to them. So all you have to do is sit back and observe how your child expresses love to you. If they're always bringing you things as a gift, then their love language is probably gift giving. If they're always hugging and kissing on you, it's probably physical touch. If they're always telling you, I love you, Mommy, you're the prettiest mommy in the world, it's probably words of affirmation. If they're always wanting to help you and do things for you, it's probably acts of service. And last but not least, if they want one-on-one time with you, Mom, just us, or Dad, just us, it's probably quality time. So all you have to do is observe how they express love to you, because a child will give you what they need from you. Now let me say that again, because that's very important. Your child will give you what they need from you. In other words, they will express love to you in the way that they need love from you. Yeah. In fact, everyone does that, adults included. Why? Because it's part of human nature, and let me prove it to you. Turn with me, if you would, to the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse number 12. This is a very familiar passage of Scripture. It says, therefore, underline the word therefore. Whenever you see the word therefore, you need to ask yourself, why is therefore therefore? Therefore, however you want people to treat you, so treat them, for this is the law and the prophets. Now, this is known as the golden rule, and even if you weren't raised in church, you know it. The golden rule simply states, treat people the way you want to be treated. But let's dig a little bit deeper. Let me show you something interesting. Notice that this verse begins with the word therefore. Therefore, however you want people to treat you, so treat them. Now, the word therefore is translated from the Greek word un, and un is an inferential conjunction. It infers something. Now, an inferential conjunction introduces a logical conclusion drawn from the facts stated in the previous verse. A logical conclusion inferred from the previous verse. In other words, because of the facts stated in verse 11, we can draw the conclusion that we need to treat people the way we want to be treated. So what are the facts in verse number 11? Well, look at verse 11. If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more shall your Father who is in heaven give what is good to those who ask him? Now, how in the world do you draw the conclusion that we need to treat people the way we want to be treated from verse number 11? How do you draw the conclusion from that? Well, notice the phrase, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. Do you see that? This says that everyone knows how to give good gifts to their children. So let me ask you a question. How do you know what to give to your children? And how do you know what constitutes a good gift? Well, the implication is it's instinctive. In other words, you instinctively know to treat those that you love the way you want to be treated. And it's true. We naturally treat those we love the way we want to be treated. In other words, we instinctively apply the golden rule to those we love. Let me say that again. We instinctively apply the golden rule to the people that we love. We treat those we love the way we want to be treated, but we don't treat others the same way. No. And the Jews were really bad about this. The Jews would treat their children and their spouse and their neighbors the way they wanted to be treated. But if you were a foreigner or someone they didn't know, they wouldn't treat you that way. So Jesus comes along and he gives us the golden rule. He says you treat everyone, not just your kids, not just your spouse, not just your siblings, not just your parents. You treat everyone the way you want to be treated. Yeah. So notice what this is saying, because this is very important. If you're taking notes, I would write this down in our app. We instinctively treat those we love the way we want to be treated. Now let me say this in a different way, so you'll catch what I'm saying here. We naturally express love the way we want love expressed to us. Yeah, we instinctively apply the golden rule. We naturally express love the way we want love expressed to us. We naturally treat those we love the way we want to be treated. We naturally express love to those we love the way we want them to express love to us. That's the golden rule. But the Bible tells us that's instinctive. The reason Jesus gave us the golden rule is because it's instinctive to do that with those we love, but it's not instinctive to do that with those we don't love. So he just takes it a step further. But here's what I want you to understand. It's instinctive to express love in the way that we want love expressed to us. So if you want to know what your child's love language is, all you have to do is observe how they express love to you. And that's how you know what their love language is. Now, let me apply this to marriage, and then we'll come back with kids and talk about kids who are out of the home. Let's talk about marriage. When Lisa and I first got married, our first few years were kind of rough. And you want to know why? Because of our love languages, and I didn't even know what a love language was. My predominant love language is words of affirmation, so I was always telling Lisa how much I loved her. She was so special to me. She was more important to me than anything in the world. And, of course, physical touch, so I'm always holding hands, doing those things. But her predominant love language is acts of service. So she never reciprocated and told me how much she loved me and how special I was and that I was the greatest thing in the world. She never told me that. The way she expressed love is she was always making my favorite dessert or doing little things for me, but that didn't express love to me. Her secondary love language is gift giving, so she would buy little things for me, and boy, here's what's interesting. The way she expressed love to me is the way she needed love expressed to her, and I never did anything for her. But I always told her how much I loved her. And in her mind, she was thinking, words are cheap. Why don't you do something for me? And she'd do these things for me, and I would think, so you're doing these things for me. Why don't you tell me you love me? We weren't speaking the same language when it came to love. And as a result of that, neither one of us were feeling loved by the other. And one day, this is in the 80s. In fact, Gary Chapman had not even thought about his book then. He didn't write his book, The Five Love Languages, till 1992. So anyways, it's in the 80s. I'm at John Brown University. I'm in one of my classes. One of the professors hands out this paper, and it's the 5 ways to express love. And he starts going through these 5 ways to express love because it's one of the common counseling classes you have to have. Anyways, won't go into it. But as he's going through it, I recognize I'm words of affirmation. I recognize I'm physical touch. And then I notice Lisa's acts of service. And she is gift giving. And I think, oh my gosh, we're not communicating love with each other. And that changed our marriage. I started, and I still have to consciously work at it, to do things for her so she'll know how much I love her. She now tells me how important I am to her and how much she loves me, and she even lies and tells me how good looking I am. But here's what's interesting. Once we started doing that, we connected. But then we started looking at our children. And of course, Micah was the only one at that point, but we started noticing these tendencies. Macy came along, we saw this, and we started expressing love to our children according to their love language. And let me tell you, the bond in our family was just like this. Now, let's go back to parenting. If you're an empty nester, and your children are out of the home, and they haven't embraced your convictions and your core values, it's probably because they didn't form a strong bond with you. And it's not that you didn't do those 7 things that I talked about. You might have tucked them into bed. You might have ate dinner at the table. You might have spent quality time with them. You might have done all of these things. But it's just like they didn't bond with you. I'll tell you why. 9 times out of 10, it's because you didn't speak their love language. Therefore, they didn't feel loved. They knew you loved them, but they didn't feel loved. You know, I told you this, and I'm being very honest. I so appreciate my dad. Love my dad. He was such a good father. Such a great father. But my mom made me feel loved. I knew my dad loved me, but when he did these things that he was expressing love, it didn't make me feel loved. My mom made me feel loved. You might have think that, I love those kids, I don't understand. If your child has left the home and they didn't embrace your core values or your convictions, I can almost guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, it's because you didn't speak their love language. And as a result of that, they didn't develop that very strong bond. Now, that doesn't mean it's over, even if they're out of the house. You've got to figure out what their love language is. And you have to start expressing love in the way that they need love expressed to them. And you can still develop that bond. Now, there's certain things you can't make up. I'm not saying, well, because of that, they'll start embracing your core values and your convictions. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying the first thing you work on is that relationship where you build that bond through communicating love in the way they need it communicated.